The Zarathi fleet emerged from hyperspace like a swarm of metallic locusts, their crimson hulls gleaming against the star-speckled void. Admiral Kethvar stood on the bridge of the flagship Bloodclaw. His forearms crossed in satisfaction as he surveyed the primitive solar system before them. The third planet from the star glowed blue and white, exactly as their scouts had reported. Such a beautiful world, he mused, his mandibles clicking with anticipation, and so poorly defended. Commander Veltak approached, his scales rippling with excitement. "Admiral, our sensors detect only basic orbital platforms and what appear to be primitive chemical rockets. The inhabitants call themselves humans, and their technology is laughably inferior to ours." Kethvar's eyes narrowed as he studied the tactical display. Earth hung before them like a ripe fruit, seemingly protected by nothing more than a handful of space stations and a few dozen vessels that barely qualified as warships. The Zarathi Empire had conquered 17 star systems in the past decade, each one putting up fierce resistance with plasma cannons, energy shields, and faster-than-light combat vessels. This world looked as if it could be taken with a single battle group. "Pitiful," Kethvar muttered. "Their largest vessels are smaller than our scout ships. Have we confirmed their military capabilities?" "Yes, Admiral. Chemical propulsion, kinetic weapons, and what they call nuclear warheads. Stone Age technology compared to our plasma arrays and quantum shielding." Veltak's voice dripped with disdain. "Intelligence suggests their entire military force consists of less than 50 space-capable vessels and some ground-based defense networks." The Admiral walked to the massive viewport, watching as Earth grew larger. Reports from their infiltrator drones painted a picture of a divided species still squabbling over territorial boundaries and resource allocation. Their military was fragmented into competing factions called nations, each with different equipment and strategies. It was almost insulting how easy this conquest would be. "Open the communication channel to the planet," Kethvar ordered. "Let's give them a chance to surrender before we demonstrate the futility of resistance." The bridge crew worked efficiently, their clawed fingers dancing over holographic controls. Within moments, they had tapped into Earth's communication networks, broadcasting on all major frequencies and channels. Kethvar's image appeared on television screens, radio broadcasts, and internet feeds across the globe. His towering reptilian form, covered in ceremonial battle armor, was designed to intimidate. When he spoke, his words were translated by the ship's universal language matrix. "People of Earth, I am Admiral Kethvar of the Zarathi Empire. Your world has been selected for incorporation into our domain. You have 48 of your hours to surrender unconditionally. Comply and your deaths will be swift. Resist, and we will make examples of your cities before claiming what is rightfully ours." The transmission cut abruptly, leaving stunned silence across the planet. In the following hours, Earth's news networks exploded with coverage. World leaders held emergency sessions. Military commanders scrambled to assess their options against an alien force that had appeared from nowhere. On the Zarathi flagship, intelligence reports flooded in as their surveillance systems monitored Earth's communications. The humans were panicking, exactly as expected. Their primitive governments were arguing among themselves about response strategies. Some wanted to attempt negotiation, others called for immediate military action, and a few suggested complete surrender. "Look at them scurry," Veltak observed with amusement as he watched intercepted video feeds. "Their leaders can't even agree on a unified response. This will be over before it begins." But Admiral Kethvar noticed something odd in the intelligence reports. While most of Earth's population was indeed panicking, there were pockets of unusual calm. Small groups of humans, particularly older individuals, seemed to be reacting differently. Instead of fear, their biometric readings showed something else entirely: preparation. In a small town in Montana, 73-year-old John Mitchell sat in his basement, methodically cleaning a rifle that looked far more advanced than anything in the Zarathi intelligence files. His weathered hands moved with practiced precision, and his eyes held the cold focus of someone who had killed before. Similar scenes played out across the globe. In Russia, an elderly woman named Katya Volkov was making phone calls to numbers that didn't officially exist. In Japan, a man called Hiroshi Tanaka was entering codes into a computer system that wasn't supposed to be connected to any network. In Australia, former Royal Marine Tom Bradley was checking equipment that bore no resemblance to anything in Earth's public military arsenals. The Zarathi continued their surveillance, confident in their assessment. Earth's official military forces were exactly as weak as they appeared. The United States Space Force operated a handful of orbital platforms armed with kinetic weapons. The European Space Defense Initiative had 3 combat vessels with basic missile systems. China's military space program was similarly limited. Russia's off-world capabilities were minimal. Every nation's space-based defenses were decades behind Zarathi technology. But the aliens had made a crucial error in their intelligence gathering. They had focused on official military assets, government installations, and public defense systems. They had completely missed the shadows. Kethvar studied the tactical display showing Earth's orbital defenses. A few space stations, some satellite networks, and those pathetic human vessels that looked like they belonged in a museum. Their largest warship was something called a carrier, designed to launch small atmospheric fighters. The Zarathi possessed weapons that could vaporize it in seconds. 40 hours remaining, he announced to his bridge crew. Begin preliminary scans for target selection. We'll start with their major population centers to demonstrate our superiority, then eliminate their military assets. This should be concluded within a day. The hours ticked by as Earth struggled to mount some kind of response. International coalitions formed and dissolved. Military leaders pleaded for more time to coordinate defenses. Scientists worked frantically to analyze the alien technology from long-range sensor data. Everything appeared exactly as the Zarathi expected. Chaos, fear, and a species completely outmatched by superior firepower. Meanwhile, in hidden locations around the world, different conversations were taking place. Secure lines crackled with coded messages. Ancient protocols, dormant for decades, began activating. Men and women who had officially retired, officially died, or officially never existed started making their way to locations that weren't on any map. The Zarathi fleet maintained its position just beyond Earth's moon, confident and patient. Their ships were marvels of military engineering. Kilometer-long dreadnoughts armed with plasma cannons capable of melting continents, shielded by energy barriers that could deflect nuclear weapons, propelled by engines that could fold space itself. Against Earth's primitive rockets and chemical explosives, victory was inevitable. Admiral Kethvar allowed himself a moment of satisfaction as he watched Earth's feeble attempts at preparation. Their largest military vessels were moving into defensive positions around the planet. Their orbital platforms were powering up what passed for weapons systems. A few nations had even launched additional rockets, though sensors showed they carried nothing more threatening than communication equipment and basic scanning arrays. "Sir," Veltak reported, "Earth's governments have sent multiple surrender offers, but they're contradictory. Some nations want to negotiate terms, others are demanding guarantees, and several are refusing to acknowledge our authority entirely. It's complete chaos." "As expected from a primitive species," Kethvar replied. "When the deadline expires, we'll begin with their capital cities. Once they see our true power, any remaining resistance will crumble immediately." The final hours before the deadline brought increasingly desperate messages from Earth. Pleas for mercy, offers of resources, attempts at negotiation, all exactly what the Zarathi had seen from every other world they had conquered. The humans were following the same predictable pattern of fear, confusion, and ultimate capitulation. But in those final hours, something else was happening that the Zarathi surveillance systems couldn't detect. Across Earth, individuals who had spent decades in shadows were stepping into the light. They moved with purpose, carrying equipment that officially didn't exist, toward positions that weren't on any blueprint. John Mitchell climbed into the cockpit of a vehicle that looked nothing like the primitive rockets Earth was supposed to possess. Its hull was composed of materials that shouldn't have existed according to human technology, and its weapon systems bore no resemblance to anything in Earth's public arsenals. Katya Volkov descended into a command bunker that was buried so deep and so well shielded that no alien sensor could detect it. Banks of computers hummed to life, displaying tactical information that suggested Earth had been preparing for this day far longer than anyone suspected. Hiroshi Tanaka stood before a massive structure that rose from a hidden launch facility in the Japanese mountains. The machine was sleek and deadly, covered in stealth plating that absorbed sensor sweeps like a black hole drinking light. As the deadline approached, Admiral Kethvar felt the familiar excitement of imminent victory. In just a few more hours, he would add another conquered world to his record. The Zarathi Empire would gain a beautiful new planet, billions of new slaves, and vast resources to fuel their continued expansion across the galaxy. He had no idea that Earth's real defenders had been watching his fleet since the moment it arrived, analyzing every ship, cataloging every weapon, and preparing responses with technology that made Zarathi plasma cannons look like slingshots. The 48-hour deadline was about to expire, and the real war was about to begin. But Admiral Kethvar remained confident in his overwhelming superiority. After all, what could a species of primitive humans possibly do against the might of the Zarathi Empire? He was about to find out. The deadline expired at precisely 14:32 Greenwich Mean Time. Admiral Kethvar stood on his bridge, watching the final minutes count down on the tactical display. Earth's governments had failed to reach a unified surrender agreement, exactly as he had predicted. Their last desperate message had been a rambling plea for more time from someone called the United Nations Secretary-General. "Time's up," Kethvar announced, his mandibles clicking with anticipation. "Target the human capital cities. We'll begin with the largest population centers to maximize psychological impact. Prepare the plasma bombardment arrays." Commander Veltak's claws danced across the tactical console, selecting targets from the list their scouts had prepared. New York, London, Moscow, Beijing, Tokyo, each city marked for immediate destruction to demonstrate Zarathi superiority. The fleet's main guns began charging, their energy signatures building to devastating levels. "Bombardment arrays at 60% charge," the weapons officer reported. "Estimated time to full power, 4 minutes. Kethvar smiled, showing rows of razor-sharp teeth. The humans had made their choice. Now they would learn why the Zarathi Empire had never lost a single conquest. His fleet of 47 warships represented more firepower than most species had ever encountered, enough to reduce Earth's surface to molten glass if necessary. But as the weapons charged, something impossible happened on the sensor displays. "Admiral," the sensor operator called out, his voice tight with confusion. "I'm detecting energy signatures from Earth that shouldn't be possible." Kethvar's head snapped around. "Explain, sir. There are massive power buildups occurring at multiple locations across the planet. The energy readings are... They're higher than our own weapons, sir, but that's impossible. Our intelligence confirmed their technology is centuries behind ours." The Admiral strode to the sensor station, his 4 eyes studying the display with growing unease. Bright red markers were appearing across Earth's surface, each one indicating an energy signature that matched or exceeded Zarathi military-grade systems. There were dozens of them scattered across every continent. "Sensor malfunction," Kethvar declared. "Run a full diagnostic. These readings can't be accurate." But even as the diagnostic ran, more impossible signatures appeared on the display. Hidden facilities were powering up across Earth, their energy outputs climbing to levels that should have been beyond human capability. The diagnostic came back clean. The sensors were functioning perfectly. In the hidden command bunker beneath the Swiss Alps, Katya Volkov watched dozens of screens showing tactical data from around the globe. Her weathered face remained calm as she spoke into a secure communications array that connected her to similar facilities on every continent. "This is Control 7. All stations report ready status." Responses crackled through the encrypted network in a dozen languages, all confirming the same thing. Earth's true defenses were online and ready. The weapons that had been hidden for decades were finally activating. The soldiers who had officially never existed were taking their positions. "Control 7 to all stations," Katya continued, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what was about to happen. "The enemy has made their intentions clear. Humanitarian protocols are suspended. Execute Order Omega." Around the globe, facilities that didn't exist on any map began revealing themselves. Massive doors opened in mountainsides, exposing weapon platforms that could have been alien technology themselves. launch silos that were supposed to contain decommissioned nuclear missiles, opened to reveal something far more advanced. Orbital platforms that had masqueraded as communication satellites suddenly bristled with weapons that shouldn't have been possible to build. John Mitchell's fingers flew over controls that resembled no human technology in the public record. His craft, sleek and deadly, lifted silently from its hidden hangar in Montana. Similar vehicles were launching from concealed bases around the world, their stealth systems rendering them invisible to conventional sensors. In space, the Zarathi fleet was about to learn that they had been catastrophically wrong about Earth's defenses. Admiral Kethvar watched in growing alarm as his sensor displays lit up with new contacts. Ships were launching from Earth, not the primitive rockets his intelligence had documented, but vessels that moved with impossible speed and grace. Their energy signatures were unlike anything in the Zarathi database. How many ships, he demanded. Unknown, sir. Our sensors are having difficulty maintaining locks. These vessels appear to have some kind of advanced stealth technology. We're counting at least 200 contacts, possibly more. 200 ships? The intelligence reports had indicated Earth possessed fewer than 50 space-capable vessels total. Where had they been hiding an entire fleet? The mystery deepened as the human vessels moved into attack formation with coordination that spoke of decades of training and preparation. Their movements were precise, disciplined, and utterly unlike the chaotic responses Earth's governments had shown during the surrender negotiations. Sir, the communications officer reported, we're receiving a transmission from the human vessels. Put it through. The view screen flickered, showing the face of an elderly human woman with steel-gray eyes and the bearing of a veteran warrior. When she spoke, her voice carried absolute authority. Zarathi Fleet. This is Admiral Sarah Chen, commanding officer of Earth's Deep Space Defense Force. You have threatened our world and our people. You have 47 seconds to reverse course and leave this system, or we will demonstrate why humanity has survived every extinction-level event this universe has thrown at us for the past 1,000,000 years. Kethvar's mandibles clicked with amusement despite his growing unease. Your primitive species thinks to threaten us? We have conquered 17 star systems. Your technology is centuries behind ours. Admiral Chen's expression didn't change. 30 seconds. You're bluffing, Kethvar snarled. Your entire civilization is built on chemical rockets and metal projectiles. We have plasma weapons that can melt continents and shields that can deflect nuclear times up. The first human attack came from directions the Zarathi hadn't even considered possible. Weapons platforms that had been disguised as asteroids in the outer system suddenly revealed themselves, opening fire with energy beams that seemed to bend space itself. The shots didn't travel through normal space. They simply appeared at their targets, bypassing shields and armor as if they didn't exist. The Zarathi cruiser Vengeful Strike simply ceased to exist. One moment it was a kilometer-long warship bristling with weapons and protected by quantum shielding. The next moment, there was nothing but expanding plasma and debris. Impossible, Kethvar roared. Their weapons can't possibly. Another cruiser vanished, then a third. The human weapons were targeting his ships with impossible precision, each shot penetrating defenses that had withstood the most advanced armaments the galaxy could produce. The human fleet closed distance with unnerving speed. Their vessels moved unlike anything the Zarathi had encountered, accelerating and turning with no regard for the physics that constrained normal spacecraft. They didn't fly. They flowed through space like living things, weaving between Zarathi defensive fire as if they could predict where each shot would be before it was fired. Return fire, Kethvar commanded. All ships, maximum bombardment. Destroy those vessels. The Zarathi fleet unleashed its full firepower. Plasma cannons that could melt asteroids, particle beams that could split atoms, and quantum torpedoes that could fold space around their targets. The combined firepower of 44 remaining ships should have been enough to vaporize the human fleet. But the human vessels simply weren't there when the weapons arrived. They moved between shots with impossible grace, their formations shifting like schools of fish in three-dimensional space. Occasionally, a Zarathi shot would pass close enough to one of the human ships to reveal glimpses of their true nature. Sleek predators, covered in armor that seemed to absorb energy rather than deflect it. And then the humans began to return fire in earnest. John Mitchell's fighter screamed through the void, its weapon systems linked to his thoughts through neural interfaces that officially didn't exist. His target was a Zarathi destroyer, its hull glowing with the heat of its own weapons fire. The old soldier's reflexes, enhanced by technology that wasn't supposed to be possible, guided his ship through a storm of enemy fire. "Fox 3, he whispered, and his ship's primary weapon spoke. The beam that lanced out was nothing like the primitive lasers or particle weapons Earth was supposed to possess. It was coherent destruction, a focused stream of entropy that unmade whatever it touched at the molecular level. The Zaratha destroyer's shields flared and died. Its hull began to dissolve. Within seconds, another enemy ship was gone. Similar scenes played out across the battlefield as Earth's hidden warriors revealed the true extent of their capabilities. These weren't the weekend soldiers and career bureaucrats who made up Earth's public militaries. These were veterans of wars that had never been officially fought, wielders of weapons that had never been officially built, protectors of secrets that had been hidden for generations. Admiral Kethvar watched his fleet being systematically dismantled by an enemy that shouldn't have existed. His tactical display showed ship after ship going dark, their symbols fading from the screen as human weapons found their marks with terrifying precision. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "Our intelligence was perfect. We surveyed this system for months." Commander Veltak was frantically consulting database records, his scales pale with shock. "Sir, I'm finding references to similar incidents in our historical archives, other species that appeared primitive until attacked. The Vorthan Empire encountered something like this 3,000 years ago. A species called the Ancients who... The Ancients are myths," Kethvar snarled. "Legends told by defeated enemies to excuse their failures." But even as he spoke, more evidence mounted that Earth was far more than it appeared. The human weapons weren't just advanced, they were revolutionary, based on principles that the Zarathe Empire didn't understand. Their ships moved as if they had mastered technologies that were still theoretical in Zarathi science. The battle had become a rout. 37 Zarathi ships had been destroyed in less than 20 minutes, while the human fleet had suffered no apparent losses. The remaining vessels were in full retreat, but the humans weren't allowing them to escape. Human fighters swarmed around the fleeing Zarathoth ships like hunters pursuing wounded prey. Their weapons reached out with surgical precision, disabling engines and weapons while leaving life support intact. They weren't just defeating the Zarathi fleet, they were capturing it. Admiral Kethvar found himself aboard one of only 3 Zarathi vessels still capable of hyperspace flight. His once mighty fleet was reduced to wreckage and prisoners, victims of an enemy that had appeared to be utterly helpless just hours before. "Sir," his communications officer reported with a voice full of fear, "we're receiving another transmission from the humans." Admiral Chen's face appeared on the screen again, but now she wasn't alone. Behind her stood other humans, men and women of various ages, all wearing expressions of grim satisfaction. They looked like soldiers, not the soft civilians the Zarathi had expected, but hardened veterans who had seen real warfare. "Admiral Kethvar," Chen said, her voice carrying the authority of absolute victory, "your fleet has been neutralized. Your surviving ships will be escorted to secure holding positions where your crews will be processed as prisoners of war. You personally will be transported to Earth for debriefing about your Empire's activities and intentions." Kethvar's mandibles clicked with rage and confusion. "This is impossible! You're primitive. Your species hasn't even achieved faster-than-light travel." Admiral Chen smiled for the first time, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Admiral, you made the same mistake that every species makes when they look at humanity. You saw what we wanted you to see. You never bothered to look deeper." Behind her, one of the other humans stepped forward. He was an elderly man with scars that spoke of old battles, and when he spoke, his accent was thick with Russian consonants. "Admiral, my name is Colonel Viktor Petrov. I am 147 years old, and I have been preparing for this day since before your empire was even aware of our existence. We have been watching you, learning about you, getting ready for you. The view screen shifted to show tactical data that made Kethvar's blood run cold. The humans had detailed intelligence on every Zarathi ship design, every weapon system, every defensive capability. They had known exactly what they were facing, and they had prepared countermeasures for everything. You see, Admiral Chen continued, humanity learned long ago that the universe is a dangerous place. We've been preparing for threats like you for over 2 centuries. What you mistook for primitive technology was actually camouflage. What you thought was disorganization was actually the greatest strategic deception in galactic history. The truth hit Kethvar like a physical blow. Earth's apparent weakness had been deliberate. The primitive rockets, the chemical weapons, the divided governments, all of it had been an act designed to make potential enemies underestimate them. But if that was true, then what was humanity's real technological level? And more importantly, what did they plan to do with the information they had just gained about the Zarathi Empire? The answers to those questions would determine the fate of not just the captured fleet, but of the entire Zarathi Empire itself. Admiral Kethvar sat in what had once been his private quarters aboard the flagship Bloodclaw, now converted into a temporary prison cell. The walls that had displayed holographic star charts and battle honors now showed only blank metal. His 4 arms were restrained by human shackles that seemed impossibly advanced for a primitive species. They adjusted automatically to his physiology and neutralized any attempt to break free using strength alone. Through the viewport, he could see his once mighty fleet being systematically dismantled by human engineering teams. The sight was deeply disturbing. The humans weren't just studying Zarathi technology. They were improving it, modifying his ship's systems with casual expertise that suggested they understood the principles better than the original builders. The door opened with a soft hiss, and Admiral Sarah Chen entered, followed by 2 escorts. She looked exactly as composed as she had during the battle, her gray hair pulled back in a regulation bun, and her uniform bearing insignia that Kethvar didn't recognize from any Earth military. "Admiral!" she said, taking a seat across from him. "I trust you've had time to process what happened to your fleet?" Kethvar's mandibles clicked with suppressed rage. "Your deception was masterful, I'll grant that. But my empire will respond to this attack. When they realize what happened here..." "They already know," Chen interrupted calmly. She activated a holographic projector that materialized between them, showing a real-time display of the Zarathi home system. "We've been monitoring their communications since your fleet arrived. Your empire has been trying to contact you for the past 18 hours. The display showed the Zarathi homeworld, its orbital installations buzzing with activity as the Imperial fleet prepared for deployment. Massive dreadnoughts were moving into formation, their weapon systems charging for what was obviously intended to be a massive retaliatory strike. Emperor Thakmor has assembled the Second Conquest Fleet," Chen continued. 300 ships, including their newest dreadnoughts. They should arrive here in approximately 6 days. Kethvar felt a surge of satisfaction despite his captivity. "Then you've signed your species' death warrant. The Second Fleet has never been defeated. They'll reduce your world to ash and atoms." "Will they?" Chen asked, and there was something in her tone that made the Zarathi admiral suddenly uneasy. "Tell me, Admiral, what do you know about human history?" The question seemed to come from nowhere. Kethvar frowned, trying to understand the connection. "Your species evolved on a single world. You've engaged in primitive warfare for your entire recorded history. You've never faced a truly advanced enemy." Chen nodded slowly. "That's what your intelligence files said, wasn't it? But consider this. Humanity has been fighting wars for over 10,000 years. We've survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, volcanic eruptions, and plagues that killed significant portions of our population. We've fought with sticks and stones, with swords and shields, with gunpowder and steel, with nuclear weapons and chemical agents." She leaned forward, her eyes holding Kethvar's gaze with uncomfortable intensity. "Every generation of humans has faced extinction, and every generation has found a way to survive. Do you know what that teaches a species, Admiral?" Before he could answer, the hologram shifted to show historical footage from Earth's past. Images flashed by: ancient human warriors, medieval battles, industrial warfare, nuclear explosions, And finally, scenes from conflicts that looked far more advanced than anything in the Zarathi database. It teaches us that survival isn't about having the best technology, Chen continued. It's about being more determined, more adaptable, and more ruthless than whatever is trying to kill us. Your empire has conquered 17 star systems. How many of those species had been fighting continuous wars for millennia before you arrived? Kethvar remained silent, but his mind was racing. Most of the species the Zarathi had conquered had been relatively peaceful, their military experience limited to border skirmishes or civil conflicts. None had possessed humanity's extensive experience with total warfare. Let me tell you what's really going to happen when your second fleet arrives, Chen said, manipulating the hologram to show Earth's solar system. First, they're going to encounter our outer defensive perimeter, which extends roughly to the orbit of Neptune. They'll find weapons platforms that our public records claim don't exist, using technology that our scientists officially haven't invented yet. The display showed the outer solar system bristling with hidden installations, massive railguns built into asteroids, stealth mines scattered through the void, and defensive stations disguised as scientific research facilities. It was a fortress that spanned billions of cubic kilometers. If they get past that, they'll face our mobile fleet, not the handful of ships your intelligence identified, but the real Earth Defense Force. Over 1,000 vessels, each one designed specifically to counter Zarathi technology, based on data we've collected from your ship's databases. Kethvar's eyes widened. 1,000 ships? Even if they were primitive, those numbers would be formidable. But Chen wasn't finished. And if, by some miracle, they break through our outer defenses and our fleet, they'll still have to face Earth itself. Do you see that blue-white planet, Admiral? It's not just our homeworld. It's the most heavily fortified celestial body in this sector of the galaxy. The hologram zoomed in on Earth, revealing details that the Zarathi surveys had completely missed. The planet's surface was covered with defensive installations hidden beneath cities, forests, and oceans. Orbital platforms that had appeared to be civilian infrastructure were actually weapon systems capable of engaging capital ships. Even Earth's moon had been converted into a massive fortress, its far side bristling with defensive systems. Every human settlement, from our largest cities to our smallest towns, has been preparing for this day, Chen explained. Our children learn to fight before they learn to walk. Our farmers know how to make explosives from fertilizer. Our factory workers can convert their assembly lines to produce weapons in a matter of hours. She stood up, pacing to the viewport where Kethvar's captured fleet was being systematically studied and reverse-engineered. You want to know the real difference between humans and the other species you've conquered, Admiral? When you attack us, you're not fighting our military. You're fighting our entire civilization. The door opened again, and Colonel Viktor Petrov entered, carrying a data tablet. His weathered face showed grim satisfaction as he approached Chen. Admiral, the prisoner interviews are complete, he reported. We've extracted detailed information about Zarathi military doctrine, fleet compositions, and strategic objectives. The intelligence analysts estimate we now have enough data to predict their tactical responses with 97% accuracy. Kethvar felt his blood chill. His crews had been interrogated? You can't have broken our security protocols so quickly. Our personnel are trained to resist primitive torture techniques. Yes, Petrov agreed. But we're not using torture. We're using advanced psychotropic compounds that were developed during our Cold War period. Your people have been very cooperative once the chemicals took effect. Chen turned back to Kethvar, her expression showing something that might have been pity. Admiral, I want you to understand something crucial. Humanity didn't develop our advanced technology in the past few decades. We've been preparing for interstellar war for over 200 years. The primitive facade you observed was a deliberate deception designed to make potential enemies underestimate us. But why? Kethvar demanded. If you possessed such technology, why hide it? Because the galaxy is full of species like yours, Chen replied. Aggressive, expansionist, convinced of their own superiority. If they knew humanity's true capabilities, they would unite against us before we were ready. So we let them see what they expected to see. a young species still struggling with basic spaceflight. She activated another section of the hologram, showing star charts that revealed the true scope of human expansion, hidden colonies in distant systems, disguised research stations, and intelligence-gathering operations that had been monitoring dozens of alien civilizations. We've been watching you, Admiral. All of you. Every empire, every federation, every species that might pose a threat to Earth. We know your strengths, your weaknesses, your technologies, and your intentions, and we've been preparing countermeasures for all of it. The implications hit Kethvar like a physical blow. If humanity had been conducting covert surveillance for centuries, then they knew about far more than just the Zarathi Empire. They knew about every major power in the local galactic region. The Vex Consortium's bioweapons, Chen continued, apparently reading his thoughts. The Helian Republic's quantum cannons. The Korth hegemony's dimensional shields. We have countermeasures for all of them, Admiral, because humanity learned long ago that the only way to ensure survival is to be prepared for every possible threat. Petrov consulted his tablet again. Admiral, we've also completed the analysis of their communication protocols. We can now intercept and decode all Zarathi military transmissions in real time. The Second Fleet will be flying blind when they arrive. Kethvar slumped in his restraints, the full magnitude of humanity's deception finally becoming clear. They hadn't just hidden their technology. They had infiltrated every aspect of galactic civilization while remaining completely invisible. The Zarathi Empire, like every other aggressive species, had been operating under the assumption that they were dealing with primitives when they were actually facing the most sophisticated intelligence operation in galactic history. There's something else you need to understand, Chen said, her voice becoming even more serious. Your attack on Earth has triggered protocols that have been in place for 2 centuries. As of 6 hours ago, every hidden human installation in the galaxy has gone active. Our sleeper agents have begun sabotage operations against Zarathi infrastructure. Our deep space monitoring stations are tracking every ship movement in your empire. The hologram shifted again, showing real-time intelligence from inside Zarathi space. Industrial facilities were experiencing mysterious failures. Communication networks were being disrupted. Supply lines were breaking down as cargo ships suffered inexplicable system malfunctions. We're not just defending Earth, Admiral. We're systematically dismantling your empire's ability to wage war. By the time your Second Fleet arrives here, they'll find their home systems in chaos and their supply lines cut. Kethvar stared at the display in growing horror. The humans weren't just prepared for invasion. They were conducting their own offensive operations across thousands of light-years of space, all coordinated with precision that suggested decades of planning. But the most important thing you need to understand, Chen continued, is that this isn't personal. Humanity doesn't hate the Zarathi Empire. We simply refuse to be conquered. If your people choose to continue this conflict, we will defend ourselves with every weapon at our disposal. But if you choose to withdraw and seek peaceful coexistence, we're willing to negotiate. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. The choice is yours, Admiral. You can help us prevent a war that will devastate both our species, or you can watch as humanity demonstrates why we've survived every extinction-level event the universe has thrown at us. For the first time since his capture, Kethvar found himself seriously considering the possibility that the Zarathi Empire might lose this conflict. Everything he had believed about human weakness had been a carefully constructed lie. The species he had dismissed as primitive possessed technology that made Zarathi weapons look obsolete and intelligence capabilities that had infiltrated every level of galactic civilization. But perhaps more importantly, they possessed something that the Zarathi Empire had never truly understood. The absolute determination that came from 10,000 years of surviving the impossible. The Second Fleet was coming, but Kethvar was no longer certain that would be enough. In fact, he was beginning to suspect that it wouldn't even be close. The Zarathi Second Fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system exactly 6 days after Admiral Kethvar's capture. Emperor Takmor himself commanded the massive formation from the bridge of his flagship Imperial Dominion, a dreadnought 3 times the size of anything in the original scouting force. 300 vessels spread out in perfect battle formation, their combined firepower capable of shattering planets. The Emperor's 4 eyes gleamed with anticipation as he surveyed the primitive solar system before him. Unlike Admiral Kethvar, He had no intention of offering surrender terms. The humans had dared to attack the Zarathi Empire, and they would pay the ultimate price for their insolence. "Status report," Takmor commanded, his voice echoing through the massive bridge. Fleet Admiral Zex Tara, his most trusted military commander, consulted the tactical displays with growing confusion. "My lord, our sensors are detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system. Far more than our intelligence predicted." The Emperor's mandibles clicked with irritation. "Explain." "Sir, there appear to be fortified positions on most of the large asteroids in the outer system. We're also detecting what look like weapons platforms disguised as space debris, and the energy readings, they're comparable to our own systems." Takmor studied the sensor displays with growing unease. The intelligence reports from Kethvar's fleet had described a handful of primitive orbital platforms and a few dozen obsolete warships. What the sensors were showing now looked more like the outer defenses of a major imperial world. "Sensor error," he declared. "These humans are primitives. Their technology is centuries behind ours. Begin the advance. We'll crush whatever pathetic defenses they've managed to assemble." But even as the fleet moved forward, more concerning data flooded in. Hidden installations were powering up across the solar system, their energy signatures indicating weapons that shouldn't have existed. Worse yet, the human ships that had destroyed Kethvar's fleet were nowhere to be seen. In the hidden command bunker beneath the Swiss Alps, Admiral Chen watched the approaching Zarathi fleet with calm satisfaction. Around her, dozens of technicians monitored displays showing every aspect of the coming battle. The defense grid was fully operational. Their stealth fleet was in position, and most importantly, their secret weapon was ready. "Ma'am," reported her communications officer, "we're receiving a transmission from the Zarathi flagship." "Put it through." Emperor Takmor's image filled the main screen, his ceremonial armor glittering with precious metals and his expression radiating imperial arrogance. When he spoke, his voice carried the absolute authority of someone who had never been defied. "Inhabitants of the third planet, I am Emperor Takmor of the Zarathi Empire. You have committed an act of war against my forces. Your species will be enslaved, your world will be stripped of resources, and your leaders will be executed as examples to any who would dare defy imperial will." Admiral Chen activated the return transmission, her own image appearing on screens throughout the Zarathi fleet. "Emperor Takmor, this is Admiral Sarah Chen, Supreme Commander of Earth Defense Forces. You are trespassing in a protected system. You have 30 seconds to reverse course and leave immediately, or we will demonstrate why your advanced scouts are no longer capable of reporting back to you." Takmor's laugh was a harsh sound that grated across the communication channel. "You destroyed a few obsolete patrol ships and now you think you can threaten an imperial fleet? We possess 300 vessels, each more powerful than anything in your primitive arsenal." 20 seconds, Chen replied calmly. "Your bluff is pathetic," the Emperor snarled. "We have plasma weapons that can boil your oceans and quantum shields that can deflect nuclear weapons. What could a species of chemical rocket primitives possibly do against the might of Time's Up?" The attack came from everywhere at once. What Admiral Kethvar had experienced was merely a preview of humanity's true capabilities. The weapons that engaged the Second Fleet operated on principles that the Zarathi Empire didn't understand and couldn't counter. Reality itself became a weapon, as spatial distortions opened inside Zarathi ships, tearing them apart from within. Emperor Takmor watched in horror as his flagship's shields simply ceased to exist. Not overpowered, not penetrated, they just stopped functioning as if the laws of physics had been rewritten. Emergency klaxons wailed throughout the bridge as impossible weapons reached through armor and hull to disable systems without leaving physical damage. "How are they doing this?" he demanded. But his science officers had no answers. The human weapons weren't following any known principles of physics. They seemed to reach across space and time to find their targets, ignoring every defensive technology the Zarathi had developed. The first wave of attacks disabled rather than destroyed, leaving hundreds of Zarathi vessels helpless but intact. Their weapon systems failed, their engines died, and their life support systems switched to emergency backup, all without any visible damage to the ships themselves. Then the second wave began. From hidden positions throughout the solar system, humanity's true fleet revealed itself. These weren't the primitive vessels the Zarathi had expected, but something far more terrifying. Ships that seemed to be made of living shadow, moving through space like predators stalking wounded prey. John Mitchell's fighter was among them, though calling it a fighter was like calling a fusion bomb a firecracker. His vessel had been enhanced with technology that pushed the boundaries of possibility, its hull composed of programmable matter that could adapt to any threat. The weapons it carried could rewrite reality at the quantum level. "Target acquired," he murmured, his neural interfaces linking directly with his ship's consciousness. Yes, consciousness, because humanity's most advanced vessels were as much living beings as machines, created through a merger of biology and technology that other species hadn't even imagined possible. The beam that lanced out from Mitchell's ship didn't just destroy the Zarathi cruiser it targeted. It unmade it, causing the vessel to phase out of existence as if it had never been built. The attack violated everything the Zarathi knew about energy conservation and matter destruction. Similar scenes played out across the battlefield as Earth's hidden warriors revealed capabilities that redefined the concept of military technology. They weren't just fighting with advanced weapons. They were fighting with tools that manipulated the fundamental forces of the universe itself. Emperor Takmor found himself watching his invincible fleet being dismantled by an enemy that shouldn't have existed. Ship after ship simply vanished from his tactical displays, not destroyed but erased from reality. Others were captured by weapons that reached through space to pluck them from the battlefield like a child picking flowers. "My lord," Fleet Admiral Zextara reported, her voice tight with panic. "We've lost over half the fleet. Our weapons can't lock onto the human vessels, and their defenses are absolute. We need to retreat immediately." But retreat was no longer an option. The human fleet had surrounded them in three-dimensional space, creating a sphere of death that encompassed the entire Zarathi formation. Every escape route was blocked by vessels that moved like liquid darkness through the void. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving another transmission from the humans." Admiral Chen's face appeared on the main screen again, but now she wasn't alone. Behind her stood representatives of dozens of species that Takmor recognized, former enemies of the Zarathi Empire who were supposed to be conquered slaves. "Emperor," Chen said, her voice carrying absolute authority, "your fleet has been neutralized. Your empire's infrastructure is being systematically dismantled by our operatives. Your slave worlds are being liberated as we speak. The Zarathi Empire's reign of conquest is over." The screen split to show real-time footage from across Zarathi space. On world after world, the Empire's control was collapsing as hidden human agents activated sleeper networks that had been in place for decades. Zarathi garrison forces were surrendering to local populations equipped with impossibly advanced weapons. Industrial facilities were shutting down as their control systems were overridden by human cyber warfare specialists. "This is impossible," Takmor snarled. "You're primitives. Your species hasn't even achieved interstellar flight." "Emperor," said one of the figures behind Chen, and Takmor's blood chilled as he recognized the speaker. It was Admiral Vortak of the Kalani Republic, a brilliant strategist who had been presumed dead when the Zarathi conquered his homeworld 15 years ago. "Humanity has been preparing for this day since before your empire existed," Vortak continued. "They rescued me and thousands of other military officers from conquered worlds. They've been building a coalition of every species you've enslaved, training us, arming us, and preparing us for the day when your empire would finally overreach itself." The truth hit Takmor like a physical blow. The humans hadn't just been preparing to defend Earth. They had been organizing a galaxy-wide rebellion against Zarathi rule. Every conquered species, every enslaved population, every resistance movement had been secretly supported and coordinated by human intelligence networks. "You see, Emperor," Chen explained, "humanity learned something important from our own history. Empires that rule through fear and conquest always make the same mistake. They create more enemies than they can control. We've simply been helping your enemies prepare for the right moment to strike." The display showed the scope of the uprising that was sweeping across Zarathi space. 17 star systems were in open revolt, their populations armed with weapons that made Zarathi military technology look primitive. It wasn't just a military defeat, it was the complete collapse of imperial authority. But we're not monsters, Chen continued. Unlike your empire, we don't believe in genocide or eternal slavery. Every Zarathi who lays down their weapons and renounces conquest will be allowed to live. Your species can have a future emperor, but not as galactic conquerors. Takmor looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. They were his most loyal soldiers, veterans of dozens of conquests, but he could see the defeat in their eyes. They had come to crush a primitive species and instead found themselves facing an enemy that had been preparing for this moment for centuries. "What are your terms?" he asked, the words tasting like poison in his mouth. "Complete surrender of all military forces. Immediate cessation of all conquest activities. Reparations to be paid to every species harmed by Zarathi expansion. And most importantly, Emperor, you personally will stand trial for crimes against sentient beings." The Emperor's mandibles clicked with rage, but he could see no alternative. His fleet was destroyed, his empire was collapsing, and his enemies possessed technology that made resistance impossible. The Zarathi Empire that had dominated this sector of the galaxy for 3 millennia was finished. "I accept your terms," he said, the words barely audible. 6 months later, Admiral Kethvar stood in the observation deck of a human space station, watching as former Zarathi worlds celebrated their independence. The trials had been fair but thorough, with Emperor Takmor and his inner circle facing justice for their crimes, while ordinary Zarathi citizens were helped to rebuild their society along peaceful lines. Admiral Chen joined him at the viewport, looking out at the stars that were now protected by the Terran Federation, an alliance of every species that had suffered under Imperial rule. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "The invasion, I mean. If you could go back and choose differently, would you?"
Kethvar considered the question carefully.
His empire was gone, his military career was over, and his species was learning to coexist with former enemies. But the galaxy was more peaceful than it had been in centuries, and species that had lived in fear were now free to develop and explore. "No," he said finally. I think this is how it was always supposed to end. We were never as strong as we believed, were we?" Chen smiled, the same expression she had worn when offering him the choice between war and peace. "Strength isn't about who has the biggest weapons, Admiral. It's about who's willing to fight the hardest for what they believe in. And humanity has always believed that every species deserves the right to choose its own destiny." Above them, the stars shone with the light of 1,000 free worlds, and somewhere among them, Earth continued its ancient watch, no longer hiding in the shadows, but standing guard as the protector of those who could not protect themselves. The galaxy had learned what Admiral Kethvar discovered too late. Humanity seemed defenseless only until you gave them a reason to fight back, and when that happened, the old warriors of Earth would show the universe exactly why their species had survived everything the cosmos could throw at them. They were humanity. They endured. They protected, and they never, ever gave up.